Nice to be with you here. We have two of the foremost national voices from both sides of the aisle providing an in-depth look at the national political scene heading into 2014, our midterm elections, and then looking ahead to 2016, putting the upcoming election into context of the larger political landscape. Two of CNN's leading pundits debate key issues, including the final 2 years of the Obama administration, direction of the GOP, the political landscape in Michigan, and anything else they would like to talk about. We're going to cover. First up, S.E. Cupp is a host of CNN's Crossfire, which relaunched in the fall of 2013. She also serves as a commentator across the network's programming and special political coverage, as well as an author, freelance political columnist, and conservative culture critic. A conservative columnist, public speaker, and author, Cupp wrote the book Losing Our Religion, The Liberal Media's Attack on Christianity, co-authored Why You're Wrong About the Right. She's a daily contributor to The Blaze's Real News and a consultant for HBO's The Newsroom. Cupp writes a weekly column for the New York Daily News, a monthly column as contributing editor for Town Hall magazine. Prior to joining CNN, she co-hosted MSNBC's The Cycle. She earned a bachelor's degree in art history from Cornell University, as well as a master's degree from New York University, and has her master's degree in religious studies. Please welcome S.E. Cupp. You came out fast. Please pay no attention to the man seated on my right.
Sorry.
You probably recognize him as Paul Begala. Paul Begala is a Democratic strategist who serves as a political contributor for CNN, apparently appearing rather frequently on CNN's The Situation Room. He used to co-host Crossfire. Are you aware
Really?
of that? Are you aware of that?
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah, so was Jon Stewart.
Used to.
He sort of canceled me on national television.
Really? Yeah. Formerly a co-host of Crossfire, CNN's political debate program. Paul first entered the national political scene after his consulting firm helped get some guy named Bill Clinton elected president in 1992, served in the Clinton administration as counselor to the president, a role that made him responsible for defining and defending the administration's agenda, serving as a principal public spokesperson. Author of several best-selling books as well, Is Our Children Learning? A Case Against George W. Bush. That wasn't very nice.
That was a direct quote. He said it in Michigan, in fact, actually. He did.
He did? Well, and it's still the economy stupid. He earned his bachelor's and law degrees from the University of Texas, still very, very much involved in what is happening in our country behind the scenes and not so much behind the scenes. And I'll offer you the first opportunity to speak to us first.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you, Paul W., and thank you, everybody at the Regional Chamber. This is so nice of you to have us here. It's great because I live in Washington, I work in Washington, I teach at Georgetown, which is in Washington, but I grew up in America. And so it's nice to get out of Washington and actually be in America again. You know, the founding fathers set it up this way. The Constitution itself says Washington is to be a federal district 10 square miles surrounded by reality. And so to be able to come to where they're, and on top of that, they tell me that you all actually do things. Like you make things and like create jobs and like do good. Washington, you know, we talk. That's what we do. At least people like me. And so like take your child to work day is like the most awkward day of the year because I have to explain to my kids, well, this is what daddy does. He talks, he persuades people. Really, you don't have that problem, right? When your parents are on a plane somewhere and they say, what does your daughter do? What does your son do? I guarantee you they don't have the same embarrassment that my folks have. Thank God they have 5, and so they hope they can get to one of the more productive ones before they have to say, and one's a TV pundit. In fact, my father said this when I started out in politics. He sold oil field equipment. He was in the real economy. Pipes, drill bits. We were in Sugar Land, Texas, where I grew up. And when I got into politics, he said that, oh, that's just such a dirty business. I said, well, you know, this will shock you, Dad, but, you know, Mother Teresa didn't spend her career in the oil patch. You know, there are people who think oil is a dirty business. He said, well, politics is worse. The very word is a Greek root, poly, which means many, and ticks, which are blood-sucking insects. So Dad kind of won that one. My own definition of it has always been that politics is show business for ugly people.
Hey.
I must say S.E. Cupp is the exception that proves that rule. And it's great to be with her because, and I do hope you'll see, we work together at CNN. We see things very differently, but she's way smart.
Oh, no.
And often I'm doing these things on TV, and it's terrible because sort of you can see almost as if it were a chyron across my face. I think, damn, she's right. So I'll try not to do that today. But this is the kind of discussion I hope that we can have more of. And I want to pick up, though, on what Senator Levin said. Your state, my goodness, you're losing a lot of power and seniority between Senator Levin, Congressman Dingell, Chairman Dave Camp of the House Ways and Means Committee. I mean, your state, it's phenomenal. When they have that honorific in front of people's names, the Honorable, nobody captures that more than Carl Levin. He is the Honorable Senator from your state, and he has served you with such distinction. And John Dingell, I mean, there are two members of Congress who I've known for decades who I cannot bring myself to call by their first names, John Lewis and John Dingell. They will always be Mr. Lewis and Mr. Dingell to me because I stand in awe of John Dingell. What he has done for this country, he has real power, not influence. He has power. And he has used that power to lift up the dispossessed and the defenseless and to educate poor people and to bring health care to poor people. What he has done for your state and our country can never be measured. And so I think it's wonderful that you're honoring, and by the way, Dave Camp, a Republican chairman of Ways and Means, one of the more successful and decent chairmen that this Congress has. So you're losing a lot, but as the Bible says, much is taken, but much abides. You do have in what will soon be your senior senator, Debbie Stabenow, a remarkable leader. I work with her a lot. And here's what she did. She did exactly what Carl Levin was talking about. She actually committed legislation. Who'd have thought? It doesn't happen in Washington anymore. But she actually sat down and worked with the Republicans and passed a farm bill. Now, the farm bill happens to be terrific for Michigan fruit, Michigan vegetables, Michigan industry. It's really, really good for the Great Lakes. Those of us like me who hunt and fish and believe in wild Michigan, or in my case, wild Texas, we get a lot of good out of that. But she did that the old-fashioned way, by working across the aisle. You know, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, the House is controlled by the Republicans, and they can't pass motherhood or apple pie. And Senator Stabenow, chairing a powerful committee, and by the way, the third-ranking member of the Finance Committee, which is the most powerful committee in the Senate, she's been able to get that done. She just did it again. The only two major pieces of bipartisan legislation, both are Stabenow's. The Farm Bill and now a community mental health law, which we had not fixed since John Kennedy was president. So you all, I know you're famous for making cars in this state, but you really do a good job of making really pretty successful, bipartisan, successful politicians. So I want to salute you for that. So why doesn't that happen more? Well, Shakespeare said the fault, dear Brutus, lies not in the stars, it lies in ourselves. You know, we don't reward it anymore. Michigan does and has, and I hope you will continue to. But in the main, right now, we are firing people for compromising. We the people are. We have, in my beloved Texas, Ted Cruz ran across Texas and he won a huge landslide, fair and square, and he did not lie. He said, I will lay down in front of a train rather than compromise with Barack Obama. That's what he said. And he won a landslide, fair and square. But that's not a recipe for getting things done the way Michigan legislators have. It is not. And my definition of one of these Tea Party activists is someone who says they revere the Constitution but has never read it. You can't read Mr. Madison's masterpiece and not be for compromise. It is a compromise. The whole Constitution is a basket of compromises. I mean, come on. Utah, Wyoming, they get as many votes in the Senate as Michigan. Wyoming has less than like 500,000 people in Wyoming. They get the same number of votes as Michigan or Texas or California. There are more people stuck in traffic on I-75, 94, and 96 right now than in the entire state of Wyoming. But they get 2 votes and you only get 2. Why? Compromise. We had to cut a deal. That's what the Constitution is. And it really does frustrate me, and I think it's at the core of what's going on. People always ask me, are we more polarized than ever? And the honest answer is no. It was actually even before my time, but there was a time when we killed 600,000 of each other. That's a little more polarization. Or in the 60s, when we were rioting in the streets. Or in the 90s, I don't think it made the papers in Michigan, but they impeached my boss. They did. Yes, it was terrible, Paul W. You should have been there. Wow. Actually, you were.
Yeah.
So it's not the most polarized, but it's the most paralyzed. Why? Because we're not rewarding that. We voters are not rewarding bipartisan compromise anymore. When I worked for President Clinton, they were impeaching him. I was working on impeachment. And I had worked on the Hill for quite a long time, and I had some relationships there. So there was some deal he wanted cut. I don't remember what it was. He calls me in the Oval Office. He says, Paulie, I want you to get up to the Hill and cut this last bit of this deal. And I said, no, sir. And he looked at me. And I said, I hate those guys. I used a different noun, but it's a mixed crowd. So I said, I hate those guys, and I can't deal with them. And he looked at me kind of like your dog looks at you when he hears a sound he's never heard before, like, really? And they're impeaching him, not me. And he said, why? And I said, well, you know, this is still impeachment going on, and I really hate them, and they hate you. And he looked at me, and he said, now, you look at your paycheck and see who signed it. I said, I know, you're the boss. He said, no, it's the taxpayers of the United States. Now, you look at the Congress paycheck, same people pay them too. He said, now, here's the deal. I know you hate like hell that they're running things up on the Hill. My guess is they hate like hell that we're running things over here in the White House. Now, get your ass up there and cut that deal. And I did. And the country reelected Bill Clinton, who compromised on things like welfare reform and crime. And then they also, frankly, reelected Gingrich and the House Republicans, who compromised with the evil Bill Clinton. You know, we doubled Newt and Bill. And these two people, I thought they really fought, you know, and yet they got together. They doubled, for example, doubled funding for the National Institutes of Health and National Cancer Institute over 5 years. Included in that was a little old, like $3 billion to decode the human genome. That alone has set off hundreds of billions of dollars of private sector wealth, growth, jobs, and innovation. Because a Democrat and a Republican got together for the common good to try to make the investments that would empower the private sector to grow. I think it's a pretty good model. And I have to say, your state is one of the few that I can come to and say, you're getting it right. You know, so I do encourage you to continue sending people there who actually know how to cut a deal and who will say what Senator Levin said. I hope you save the tape of his comments. When he said compromise is an honorable word. If we can return that to Washington with more sort of Michigan thinking in Washington instead of Washington thinking in Michigan, I think we'll all be a lot better off. Mr. Smith?
Well done.
Thank you, sir.
We now give S.E. Cupp this opportunity to address you.
Well, thank you also for having me. Thank you both. It's an honor to share the stage with both of you, and an honor, Paul, to take your place over Crossfire.
You can have it, yeah.
Thanks. I haven't been here since 1990. I was 11. Wow. And I lived here then. I lived in West Bloomfield with my parents for about 3 years. I went to Detroit Country Day, and we came up to Mackinac a couple times to visit. Took the long car ride up, and I have to say, it is so beautiful here. You forget. People forget how gorgeous this country and this part of the country really is. I hope to come back in the winter and cull your white-tailed deer population just a little. I'll work on that. So thank you so much for having me. It's really just a joy to be able to get out of Washington, as Paul said, and come here. Obviously, my focus for the past few years has been figuring out how Republicans can learn from past mistakes. And I don't know if you expected me to come out here and sort of cheerlead for Republicans. I do plenty of that on television. I'd actually like to be a little bit more self-reflective and honest, because I have a captive audience and I can do that. I think looking towards 2014, things look very good for Republicans. And I have to admit, that's not because Republicans have been very smart over the past few years. I think it's because President Obama has not effectively conditioned the environment for Democrats to win. President Obama came in 2012 with, I think, a pretty resounding mandate. And instead of capitalizing on that mandate, the first legislative action he went after was gun control. And that wasted a lot of political capital, and I think rubbed people the wrong way. And I think it was a crucial mistake. I think if you look at his second inaugural address, which was sweeping, had everything but the kitchen sink in there, there were so many other things I think that Democrats could have and should have focused on that the country really would have been behind to keep the momentum going from 2012. Then, of course, there's Obamacare, and that's been tough for vulnerable Democrats in red states to really grapple with. I mean, some don't even know how to talk about it. They don't know whether they would have voted for it. They don't know whether they want President Obama to come campaign with them. That's a problem for Democrats, and Republicans, of course, are just taking advantage of that. And then it seems like President Obama has just recently discovered income inequality. And folks in Detroit don't need lessons in what income inequality is. But for 5 years, it seems as though Obama and Democrats really ignored poverty and income inequality. And so now the focus on that is super. But the legislative response is merely to raise the minimum wage. That has not been helpful, again, for Democrats in vulnerable red states. It just hasn't been a powerful economic message. So all of those things have given Republicans a great opportunity for 2014. I hope we take advantage of that. Of course, there's plenty of time to make mistakes. We often do. But 2016 is a different story. Nationally, Republicans are in a bit of trouble. And I've spent a lot of time thinking since 2012 about why that is. And I've come up with what I think are two reasons why Republicans haven't quite gotten there nationally. One, Republicans seem to be obsessed with what I call this sliding horizontal scale of conservativeness and where everyone fits on that scale. Chris Christie's over here in untrustworthy moderate land. Ted Cruz is over here in kooky extreme land. And the various other characters are somewhere in between. And both sides are untrustworthy for various reasons. And there are constant litmus tests. And I mean, if you look around the country at the primaries, those contests have largely been about who is too conservative, who is the most conservative. I think that's really a mistake. I couldn't give a rat's who is more conservative. We're a big tent. There should be room for libertarians and moderates and social conservatives and evangelicals. I would rather see conservatives obsess over a vertical sliding scale of effectiveness. Who is a great communicator? Someone like Todd Akin might be somewhere down near the bottom. But Chris Christie might be near the top. Marco Rubio might be near the top. He's a pretty effective, compelling speaker. Who has good ideas? Who can sell those ideas? Who can talk about them effectively? Who can be disciplined on the campaign trail? So I'm hoping that we shift our focus. And if we do that, I think we're pretty unstoppable. The other problem, the second problem I see, is that historically, if you look back to when conservatives have been successful, it's when they've tapped into intellectual impulses or emotional impulses. And we haven't done either very well over the past few years. Think back to the middle of the 20th century when we had folks like Hayek, Ayn Rand, Russell Kirk. These were soaring intellectuals. Conservatism was the domain of academics. And those folks begot people like Buckley and Goldwater and Irving Kristol. They were wrestling with ideas like anti-utopianism and free market economics. That was a successful time for conservatism. Another successful time for conservatism was a couple decades later, when conservatives made populist outreaches to evangelicals and to blue-collar workers. They were emotionally connecting. Think about Reagan. Think about George H.W. Think about W. and compassionate conservatism. Those were emotional arguments that were successful. Now, conservatives today are perceived neither as particularly high-minded nor of the people. And I think that perception is wrong, and there are plenty of examples that disprove that perception, but politics is perception. So if we can't find a way as conservatives to tap into those intellectual arguments again, and look, there are plenty of smart conservatives. Look at Mark Stein. Look at Thomas Sowell. Rand Paul is a smart conservative. There are plenty of people to do it. But if we can't tap into that, and if we can't make the emotional argument that we are not plutocrats, that we are not just focused on the top 1%, but on the bottom 20% and the middle, if we can't talk like average Americans talk about real issues and talk convincingly because we care, then we're never going to win another national election. So I'm hoping that as successful as I think we're going to be in 2014, we realize very soon that we have to change the narrative as we head into 2016, and we have to rediscover and capture again our roots and our ability to be intellectually interesting and emotionally compelling. I know we're capable of it. We're capable of it not just in rhetoric, but in policy. But I think that's gotten away from us in the past few years. So wish us luck.
Is there anything either of you would like to challenge, reflect upon, agree with, disagree with, expand upon that either of you have said?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Ask questions, make statements.
Who right now is the one? I did notice, maybe I just was listening to, not Carolina, I think Ted Cruz, maybe because I'm from Texas, I think Ted Cruz, he's way, way smart. I'm not for him, okay? And I'm actually very much for him, because I think the Democrats would carry 40 states against him. But is he the sort of guy who could take that mantle, though? Because he's terribly smart. I just think he's out of the mainstream. But he's brilliant. He's a champion Princeton debater and Harvard Law School. I mean, my God, they wouldn't even let me drive past Harvard, much less go to law school there.
Yeah, I mean, the other issue, yes, he's very, very smart, and I don't disagree that he's outside of the mainstream, but that doesn't have to be a hindrance. We have to find, ecumenically, Democrats, Republicans, the right candidate for the right time. You know who wasn't the right candidate for the right time? Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is wonderful. I adore him. He would have been a fantastic president. It's a shame he didn't win. But he was the exact wrong candidate for the political culture and climate that we were all living in. I mean, it was a year after Occupy Wall Street and this war between the 1%ers and the 99%ers. And so who do we nominate? A millionaire. Now, there's nothing wrong with success. That's wonderful. But I don't think we were listening. I don't think conservatives were listening to the national discussion. So being outside of the mainstream is okay if you are tapping into the right momentum at the right time. Clearly in 2012, Ted Cruz was the right candidate at the right time. He won resoundingly.
Landslide.
And he won, as you said, making promises that he kept. It wasn't a surprise that he was going to go to Washington and take on President Obama and not compromise and try to repeal Obamacare and do it. He said as much. And he did what he promised and campaigned to do. Whether he's going to be the right candidate in 2016, I think remains to be seen. He could be. I'm not sure that that's clear just yet.
Is there a candidate, a sleeper candidate maybe, out there that people might not know about, that you might know about, the two of you, and that we should remember? It looks like she already has.
God, there is, I don't know if y'all know, there's this woman that used to be Secretary of State who I am dying to get into the race.
You know her?
I know her. 23 years I have known her. And I'm telling you, I'm wearing my knees out in prayer that she runs.
You know, she is, and you know them very, very well, but they are very, very different people.
They are. No, you're exactly right. People, that's a great point. This is why Paul W. could never work at CNN or the conventional networks, because you're smart. We always on the media lump them together and say, the Clintons. They're completely different people.
Different people.
She is, I think it's more than 75, maybe even 85% chance she runs. But she's actually thinking about it, okay? And I know her husband much better. I traveled with him. I sat next to him on the plane, and I worked for him for all those years. There would be no thinking. If we didn't have this 22nd Amendment, he'd be running for his 6th term right now, okay? And by the way, after he dies, he was going to have me do a Weekend at Bernie's thing, where I would just like carry him around. He would never stop. So she is, honestly, she's obviously quite an accomplished person, but she's less, I think, I hate to use that word, but she's less ambitious that way. I mean, it's not inconceivable she doesn't run. I think it's very likely she will. I really want her to. But they're very different. They're very different. She is extraordinarily disciplined. You know, President Clinton had his strengths and weaknesses, but particularly as a campaigner, he's incredibly gifted, but it was really hard keeping him on message. Hillary is very, very disciplined. They're very different people. You're right, but it's different times, too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I envy the Democrats in that Hillary is incredibly disciplined. And no one aside from like far left progressives really care how liberal she is. Right. Democrats don't obsess the way Republicans do about how liberal their candidates are. I think Republicans can exploit that because in many ways, Hillary Clinton is still a 1990s Democrat and the party has changed. The party's changed significantly since Hillary Clinton was last in the White House and since she was in the Senate in New York, and since she last ran for president. They've changed on social issues, they've moved farther left, they've changed on economic issues, thanks to folks like Elizabeth Warren and Bill de Blasio, and sort of the anti-bank, anti-corporatist. I mean, people forget she served on the Walmart board of advisors for 6 years. And that's fine, that's great, but Walmart's, you know, not a great resume point for Democrats today. But I don't know if he's a sleeper, and he's certainly someone you've heard of, but I really like Mike Pence. I think Mike Pence is a fantastic, fantastic candidate. He's gone to Indiana, you know, to the State House. He's kept his head down. He's made his job there not about 2016, even though I know that it's a possibility, but about Indiana. And he's been doing great things. And he's one of those people I would put at the top of that vertical scale of effectiveness. I think he's a good communicator. He's a good messenger. He's disciplined. And he can make good, compelling, emotional, compassionate arguments. I also like Scott Walker. He is a rock star. I think his record's fantastic. And he's got a little bit more, I think, national recognition and name ID than Pence. But the beauty, I guess, of the GOP bench is that it's deep. The danger in that is that it's deep. There's a lot of people that might be coaxed into running, and maybe not all that should be there. So we'll see.
Just between us, and we all promise not to tell anybody. Right. Who would you most fear running against Hillary?
Well, right now, probably either Jeb Bush or perhaps Marco Rubio. I'm sounding mean, but I've been slightly less impressed with Rubio the more I've seen him. I'm not, that's too harsh. It's not really, he's still a very impressive guy. Jeb is a real deal. Now, he's been out of the game for a long time. That might be a good thing, but there's probably some rust in the engine.
And his mother's not voting for him.
Oh, God bless her. She's fantastic. I don't know what Thanksgiving dinner is like at that house, but, you know, we'll know he's running when he goes to court to legally change his name to John Ellis instead of John Ellis Bush, which is really what Jeb is. He's very impressive. He is.
He was here last year with us.
Is that right? He's very impressive. Now, can he, this will be the test. If he runs, and I have no idea if he does, if he runs, and he says things like he said at his father's library, yes, crossing the border illegally is a civil offense. It's not a felony. It's a minor violation of the law. But it is very often an act of love. That's what he said. Well, I agree with that, okay? And yet,
does that bother you?
On the Tea Party right, How would that go over?
Not well. It did not go over well.
Yeah, like a fart in church, man.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's off the record. Don't tell my mother.
Did spend a lot of time with Bill Clinton.
But Jeb is a great example of someone who can make an emotional argument. He's compassionate and he connects. And you can tell he cares about immigration on a deeply personal level because of his personal experience in his family. Right. And that's currency. But, you know, empathy is great, and I think that's what he was tapping into, but empathy alone is not a policy. Empathy alone is not a solution to a broken system. So if he runs, and he would be a formidable candidate, I would hope that he would have more substantive policy recommendations for fixing a system that pretty much everyone around the country wants fixed.
United States Chamber President, CEO Tom Donahue, speaking of immigration reform, recently joked, quote, if the Republicans don't do it, they shouldn't bother to run a candidate in 2016. The question here is he right? And if so, are Democrats really motivated to take this issue off the table?
Sorry, if Republicans don't pass something?
Right, if they don't fix it.
If they don't fix it, try to.
Well, the dirty little secret about immigration that you will only hear in whispers off the record in dark corners on Capitol Hill, unfortunately, is that there's little incentive on either side of the aisle to actually fix immigration. Because immigration is really good for business. It's good for Democrats to be able to point at Republicans and call them anti-immigrant. And also, unfortunately, it's good for Republicans to gin up the pro-amnesty, anti-amnesty sort of fervor around that issue. And proof that there is little incentive to actually fix this broken system is the one obstacle that both sides arbitrarily always argue about, and that is a path to citizenship. Now, who doesn't prioritize a pathway to citizenship? Immigrants. They care about legal status. Becoming a citizen is not a top priority for them. In many cases, they want to come here, they want to work, they want to feed their families and return home. And that's fine. But why are we arguing over this sticking point of citizenship when we are the only ones in the political class that seem to really care about it? If we actually care about fixing the system, we'll listen to the people it really impacts, and we'll talk about the things that they care about most. I don't see that happening.
Here's why Mr. Donahue is right. When I worked for President Clinton in 1992, the Latino vote was 2% of the electorate. In 2012, just 20 years later, it had gone from 2 to 10. And the Republican share, which had been, Ronald Reagan got 37% of Latino votes. You know what Reagan used to say? He used to say, Hispanics are Republicans, they just don't know it yet. Classic Reagan, optimistic, welcoming, right? Reagan was an evangelist, not a heretic hunter. And that's what the Republicans need, frankly, is that kind of welcoming. Well, Reagan got 37. Bush got 44. George W. Bush, you know, with his old broken Spanish. I knew him back in Texas. He was El Sueño Americano, está muy bien, amigo. No, I used to tease him that he was studying Spanish so he could be bi-ignorant. But,
Oh, my God.
Man.
but he was right. He was right. And here's Bush, dumb as a box of rocks, but right about that. And there's Mitt Romney, boy genius, Mr. Harvard Law, Mr. Bain Capital. Guess what? He got 27. And he went out and he said, immigrants come to this country looking for a handout. Shame on you, Governor Romney, shame on you. And we taped that and we broadcast it because that's an insult. He not only lost Latinos, he lost Asian Americans, which Bill Clinton lost overwhelmingly to Bush's father. So,
and W got 44% of that vote, too.
the Asian American vote had been Republican for good reason. In my day, in 92, it was mostly Vietnamese who had come here, escaping communism, given freedom by Republican presidents. I agreed with them. I mean, if I was a Vietnamese immigrant, I'd have been a Republican. But Romney drove them all away. It's remarkable. And this thing is moving so quickly. So when you get a declining share of an expanding portion of the vote, you're in big, big trouble. The number one condiment in America. Salsa picante. More than ketchup, more than mustard, more than mayonnaise. In my beloved Texas, my Billy is a senior in high school. He's about to go to the University of Texas. He's 18 years old. His name is William Travis. He was born in Texas. Travis was the colonel who commanded the Texas forces at the Alamo, where while we lost, it was a very close second place. His cousin, my brother's son, born the same year, is named Sam Houston Begala. So Sam Houston and William Travis are going to start at the University of Texas in August together. This is what rednecks from Sugar Land, Texas do. They name their kids that. No more. When Billy and Sam go to college at University of Texas, you know what the #1 boy's name is in their state? Jose. Jose, can you see the demography is changing? We best get about changing with it. And this is, I know I'm a liberal, I believe in evolution and gravity and photosynthesis, electromagnetism, I believe. The iron law of evolution is adapt or die. And the Republicans have got to adapt. And I've got to give Reagan, Bush, and McCain enormous credit for that. But Romney, who's on an IQ scale above all of them, somehow couldn't figure out the political math.
It's the truth. Questions given to me, sadly.
All right.
And I agree, I think he could have been a great president at a time we really needed him with his expertise. It was truly annoying to watch that fall apart the way it did.
I agree.
Anyway.
I had to professionally watch it. That was my job.
Be a great president.
Fall apart.
Be a great president of the yacht club, but not of the United States of America. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry that I helped defeat him. I'm proud of what I did. I'll do it again. Sorry.
Oh, boy. The chamber has given me most of these questions, and one of them, I didn't realize this, but they say business organizations like the Detroit Regional Chamber increasingly find themselves without a party. Republicans seem more concerned with the Tea Party, often at odds with pro-business policies. Democrats continue their historical ties with organized labor and strident environmentalists. Is there a pro-business party anymore? How can organizations focused on results as opposed to ideology flourish in today's Washington?
Well, this will sound tangential, but it's not. Just stay with me for a second. I think that one of the ways that Republicans need to adapt to the kind of demographic shifts that Paul is rightly talking about is to connect with millennials, which is another changing tide. Millennials are going to be 80%. They're 80 million generation, and they are going to be 2/3 of the voting population in 2020. Massive, massive population of people. And one of the things that I think Republicans need to do is watch millennial trends. And one of those millennial trends is that young people are incredibly entrepreneurial, more entrepreneurial than generations past in many ways. And they live in the perfect century to be as entrepreneurial as they are. With technology and social media, it makes the brick and mortar sort of business burdens a thing of the past. They can be mobile, they can be fast, they can adapt, they can be immediate, they can be responsive, they can be creative. And they are really frustrated with Washington. They're frustrated with a slow-moving, bureaucratic, Jurassic kind of approach to business. Their heroes are in Silicon Valley. Their heroes are Sergey Brin and Mark Zuckerberg. They're not in Washington. And one of the things that I think my party needs to do is adapt to their needs. We need to be the party, again, that recognizes when regulations are too burdensome, when regulations are getting in their way, instead of empowering them. We need to empower their entrepreneurial spirit. And that, I think, overflows to the greater business community, and that's small businesses, that's big businesses, that's family businesses. We have all the tools, we just need to identify the policies and the messages that I think accommodate and adapt to the business community's needs. And I think reaching out to millennials in that way in particular is in many ways going to speak to the future business people of this country. And that's vital. That's incredibly important for our economy and for that generation.
So I think it's a great point. That is where they ought to be going. From my side, it would be pragmatic. I've never been in business. I don't really know anything about business. My father was in business. My late stepfather was a CEO. My understanding is that business people are pretty practical, right? It's not good for business to hate on gay people. You know, it's not good for business to drive certain customers away. This is pragmatic, right? And it's not good for business to shut down the entire government or to default on America's credit because you didn't get your way on repealing a healthcare law you didn't like, right? And just think, I am a big believer, I'm a progressive, of course, but I'm a big believer in progressive change, but in incremental change. And I'm a big believer in compromise, and that's why I tried to sort of stress when I was riffing on Senator Levin's comments. I do think in Washington sometimes some of the special interest lobbies that claim to represent business instead empower the fringe that is doing nothing to help business. I don't think business does any good when we, for example, cut funding for school lunches and Head Start. I just don't think that helps business. To have less healthy and less well-educated kids who are going to graduate up into your workforce. Around the country, the school reform movement is often led by business people. I mean, you all get it. But the disconnect between like business people I see in America and some of the special interest lobbyists who claim to represent you in Washington is enormous.
S.A., you've done this today, and we've heard it a lot. National pundits talk about Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin, Ohio Governor John Kasich, Indiana Governor Mike Pence, one of your favorites as presidential candidates. How come we don't hear that much about our own Governor, Rick Snyder?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's very wisely kept sort of a low profile and focused on the goings-on of his state, and pretty effectively. He's doing a pretty good job here, and I think the polls reflect that. I think he's going to have a good go of it in the State House again. I don't know. I actually think there's something admirable and inspiring about a guy who's not out chasing the brass ring of national adoration and attention. It's something that we've really gotten away from. I was reading a book recently, The Private Lives of the Founding Fathers, and George Washington had to be coaxed into attending.
Well, that is